Amen. So last week we started an Advent series thinking about the meaning of Jesus coming to the earth. And I've just titled this series Grace Among Us. And my hope, and this is true every year, my hope is that we would enter into the Advent season with a focus on what the season is really about. It is an incredible cultural opportunity for us. We live in a world that has rejected the church and rejected Christianity in so many ways, but there's still these cultural windows, these opportunities, these leftovers, and Christmas is one of those things, this celebration of the birth of Jesus. And one of the things that breaks my heart is that I feel like for the last couple of decades, the church is being pulled by the culture. So we're letting the culture dictate for us what Christmas is about, how we celebrate it, what's meaningful and valuable in the season. And so, because I don't see much difference in the church and outside of the church in how we actually function and practice the celebration of the birth of Jesus. We're just as obsessed with the trees and the toys and the tinsel and something else that starts with a T. Like we're obsessed with all of these trappings just as much as everybody else. And man, that should be going the other way because this is our holiday. This is our celebration. Like, we should be shaping the culture about how it is that we should celebrate the birth of Jesus. And that's not easy. It's not easy to even recognize kind of the cultural trappings that have wound their way into how we think and practice. And so I just want to spend the next few weeks thinking about Jesus, maybe in some outside of the box ways. As I began last week, I'm afraid that we have these caricatures of Jesus. We've taken Advent and Christmas, the birth of Jesus, the incarnation, which is God in our midst, Emmanuel, God with us, God in flesh. The whole thing is about God becoming one of us. And we flipped it around and turned Jesus into something other than us. Jesus is a caricature, an icon, a religious figure or symbol, a means to an end. If I pray a prayer to Jesus, if I claim faith in Jesus, then maybe I don't have to go to hell and I can go to heaven. And maybe if I pray hard enough, if I believe in Jesus enough, maybe I can get a better job, or maybe I can get more money, or I can get... See, we turn Jesus into this non-person. When the whole point is he came as a person. And so when we strip the humanity out of Jesus, when we strip the personality out of Jesus, when we only focus on his divinity, and he was fully God, but he was also fully man. When we do that, we miss the point. So I'm praying for myself and for each of you that we might have a fresh vision of Jesus this Advent season. We might see him in new and fresh ways. And I hope that's true for those of you that are maybe new or newer to Jesus. I especially hope that that's true for those of you that have been walking with Jesus or claiming Jesus for a long time. Because the longer we walk with him, the greater the danger is that we might take him for granted. That we become overly comfortable with him. And so I hope and pray that every single one of us in the next few weeks together, we might begin to see Jesus as he is. And that's going to mean seeing him not as we want him to be sometimes. It may mean seeing him not as our parents told us or our church told us or our experience told us. It means allowing the Spirit and the Word to do exactly what they're designed to do, which is reveal Jesus to us. So, if you've got your Bibles, would you open up to John chapter 21? John chapter 21. This is a beautiful scene from John's gospel. It comes after Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, and it centers on the disciples and especially Peter. It says this: after this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two other of his disciples were together. And Simon Peter said to them, "I'm going fishing." I think it's safe to say Peter's had a bad day. He's had a bad week. He's had a bad month. Peter has been on an emotional roller coaster. It started really, 3 years earlier when Jesus called him, but especially over the last 40 days, Peter's been through the ringer. He had the heights and the lows. It started, Matthew tells us about it in Matthew chapter 16. It says this: when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked the disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" That was Jesus' favorite way of referring to himself. So, who do people say that I am? And they said, well, some say you're John the Baptist, and others say you're Elijah, and others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. And Jesus said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the King, the Son of the living God." Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven." I don't know about you, but if you're human, like I assume you are, you like encouragement. We all like an attaboy, a way to go, a gold sticker, whatever it is. We all thrive on encouragement. And the thing about encouragement, if a stranger tells you something, hey, good job, that means something. But the more we respect a person, the more we value a person, the more we love a person, the greater importance and the greater effect of their endorsement and their compliment is, right? And I mean, there's a lot of people that I'd love to give me a compliment, but there's nobody above Jesus, right? And so think about this, Peter. And this is a God moment, right? I'm not even sure he knew what was popping out of his mouth. That's what Jesus said. That's flesh and blood. Peter, you didn't think of this on yourself. Yeah, but God gave it to you. But here's this moment where Peter just proclaims who Jesus is, and Jesus is like, "Way to go, Peter! Gold star, buddy! You got it! God has revealed himself through you." And then Jesus takes it up a notch. He says, I tell you, you're now going to be called Peter, which means rock. And on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I'll give you the keys of the kingdom of the heavens, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in the heavens, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in the heavens. I don't know about you, but I think that was like the best day of Peter's life. Like, what a moment. Jesus is affirming him. Jesus is lifting him up. Jesus is giving him meaning and purpose. Peter, you got it. I'm going to use you. I'm going to build something with you and through you, and you're going to have a place in my kingdom. I'm going to give you responsibility. I'm going to give you authority. Peter, you matter. Peter, you have a place. What a moment. I don't know about you. I crave that. But I'm not sure that would always be good for me. I'm afraid that maybe that would puff up my head so big I couldn't walk through those back doors. I think maybe Peter struggled a little bit with that too, because you just got to keep reading. As it says this, from that time on, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the third day be raised. So for years now, Jesus and Peter and the other disciples have been going from town to town and village to village announcing the gospel of the kingdom. They've been casting demons out and healing the sick and proclaiming the good news of God. But now something's happened in Transfiguration, on the mountain, the confession of Jesus. Jesus sets his face towards Jerusalem, and the rest of his ministry is focused on going to Jerusalem, suffering, dying, and being raised again. So he begins to tell his disciples over and over again, hey, all right, we've had a good run, but here's what's going to happen. We're going to go to Jerusalem, and it's going to get really, really ugly. It's going to get really bad. Peter's feeling pretty good about himself, so look what he does. Peter takes Jesus aside and begins to rebuke him. So like 1 minute, Jesus is like, Peter, dude, you got it. Like, this is awesome. We're going to do something together. And Peter's like, yeah, I'm good. And so now Jesus is like, okay, so now we're going to go to Jerusalem. This is going to happen. And Jesus, like, he pulls Jesus aside. Like, I can see this. Like, puts his arm around Jesus, like, you got to stop talking like that. I'm Peter. All right. Far be it from you, Lord. This shall never happen to you. I declare it. Lord, save us from ourselves, right? I mean, really. If Peter had his way, Jesus would not have gone to the cross. He'd still be dead in his sins. We'd still be dead in our sins. We wouldn't have anything to celebrate together this morning. But Jesus turned to Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan. You're a hindrance to me. You're not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man." Ouch. Like one minute Jesus is going, Rocky, Rocky. And the next minute, get behind me, Satan. 1 minute, God is revealing himself through Peter, and the next minute, Satan is trying to use him as a tool to hinder Jesus. It's no accident that Matthew puts these right next to each other. Like there's something for us to see and to learn here. That's a roller coaster ride. So just as Jesus said, they begin to make their way to Jerusalem. And when they get there, man, you remember the triumphal entry. Jesus sends the disciples. They get the young colt, and they bring him in, and he begins to ride into the city. It's a symbol of the king entering in a victory parade into the city, and the people go crazy. They go crazy, and they're cutting down palm leaves, and they're waving them. They're throwing down their cloaks on the road so Jesus can walk on. This is the most excitement and joy, a celebration that's hard to wrap our brains around. And imagine what it was like for Peter and the other disciples as they're in that, right? Like, it'd be hard not to strut a little, wouldn't it? Like, Jesus is sitting on the colt and walking through, and and you're like, yeah, I'm with him. Hey, back up. It's like this is just like an incredible, and then like the events of that week in Jerusalem are crazy. Like, Jesus is fighting left and right. The scribes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, they're trying to take him down. Every time they trap him, he just slips on out and traps them, and he starts overturning tables in the temple, and this whole week is amazing. It looks like, well, maybe Jesus got it wrong. Maybe he's not going to suffer. Maybe he's not going to die. Because look at everybody loves him. Everybody's welcomed him. And then for 30 pieces of silver, Judas betrays him, and he's arrested, and he's given a trial. He's beaten. But for Peter, even before all that happens, they're sitting down at the Passover meal, right? Jesus institutes communion, and Jesus turns to Simon. Luke chapter 22 records it. Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demanded to have you that he might sift you like wheat. That sends like a shiver down my spine. Satan, he's always got to ask permission. But Peter, you got to know, like, Satan's asked to take you out, buddy. And don't think for a second that he couldn't. But I've prayed for you that your faith may not fail, and when you have turned again, I want you to strengthen your brothers. So Jesus implies a couple of things in that statement. Like, Peter, you're in for something here. What he doesn't say is, I told Satan he couldn't touch you. I told Satan to get away. He doesn't say that. He says, when you have turned again. So, Peter, you got a bad day coming up, buddy. And you're going to blow it. And what I'm praying for is that after you blow it, you come back. And that you'll come back actually better. And Peter doesn't want to hear it. Peter says to him, Lord, I'm ready. I'm ready to go both to prison and to death. Jesus, like, you, maybe somebody else, but I'm ready. I'm not going to fail. I'm not going to fall. I'm Rocky. And Jesus said, Peter, buddy, I tell you, the rooster will not crow this day until you deny 3 times that you know me. Peter, you're overestimating your character and your capacity. You don't really know what you're in for. And before the sun comes up, you're not going to go to jail with me. You're not going to die for me. You're going to deny me 3 times. And because he's Jesus, he's always right. So Matthew 26, right? Peter's sitting outside in the courtyard. A servant girl comes up to him and says, you also were with Jesus, the Galilean. Like a week before, he's coming into the city. They're waving the palm branches, and Peter's like, yeah, I'm with him. Right? And now this girl recognizes him. The servant says, you were with Jesus, the Galilean. And he denies it before them all, saying, oh, I don't know what you mean. When he went out to the entrance, another servant girl saw him, and she said to the bystanders, hey, this man was with Jesus of Nazareth. And again, he denied it with an oath. Think about this. Hours before, he's like, I'm ready to die for you, Jesus. And now he's like, I swear I don't know him. And after a little while, the bystanders, no, I saw him. He was with Jesus. They're talking. And so they come back to him, and they say to Peter, certainly you too are one of them. Your accent betrays you. And he began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, I do not know that man. And immediately the rooster crowed. And Peter remembered the saying of Jesus. Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. In one moment, his dreams shattered. Just a simple thing he broke. All of his pride, all of his strength crumbled around him in his fear and failure. And then he had to watch Jesus be stripped and beaten. He had to watch Jesus lifted up on a cross. He had to experience the death of the one that he thought was the author of life. 3 days later, a bunch of the women come in. They say, we saw him alive. And he runs to the tomb. It's empty. Can you imagine what he's feeling? I think you can. Because I think we've all failed. I think we've all overestimated our strength and our ability. I think we all know what tears of bitterness taste like. And then Jesus does start to show up. This is one of my favorite appearances of Jesus. It's in Luke 24. It says, as they were talking about these things, the death and a supposed resurrection of Jesus, it says this, Jesus himself stood among them, which is really interesting because they're in a locked room. Right? So this is like Jesus the magician. Right? Like literally, they're standing around because they're worried that Rome's going to come at them. And now Jesus just in the room. What's up? Right? He says to them, peace to you. Like, if you don't want us to be afraid, don't show up in the room. This is amazing. If you don't think Jesus was having fun with this, you're missing half the point. How do you think Jesus is feeling at this moment? Think about this. How do you think Jesus is feeling at this moment? He has just suffered and atoned for and defeated sin and death. He has just risen back bodily from the dead. Jesus is having the best day ever. He is, right? Like, he's just won. He's just won. And he's like, all right, I got to go see everybody. Oh, I know what I'm going to do. Boop! Right? Like, this is... Like, I'm so afraid that we've dehumanized Jesus so we don't think of him as having a sense of humor. We can't even imagine him, playing little jokes and tricks upon his disciples. But of course he would. He does that. Here, peace be to you. And they were startled and frightened, and they're like, oh, it's a ghost. And And then Jesus said, don't be troubled. Why do doubts arise in your hearts? He says, here's my hands and my feet. It's myself. Touch me and see. Spirit doesn't have flesh and bones. You see that I have. And when he said these things, he showed them his hands and his feet. And while they were still disbelieved for joy, well, that's an interesting phrase, and were marveling, he said to them, I'm hungry. You know, anybody got anything to eat? I mean, this is like, so we turn these texts into religious texts. We strip the humanity out. Like, so they're freaking out because Jesus has just come back from the dead, and he's like, I want some breakfast. Right? No, and so they give him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and he ate it before them. Can you imagine? It's like Jesus just sits down, they give him some fish, and then just starts eating, and they're all just standing around watching him eat. Yeah, he swallowed. I thought, you see him swallow? And Jesus is like, yeah. And then he just disappears. And that's amazing. But I wonder what Peter felt. So Jesus didn't say anything about Peter's betrayal. He didn't say anything about his denial. He just had breakfast. So I don't think it's surprising that Peter went to what he knew. He was a fisherman before he met Jesus. And I think as far as Peter's concerned, he's done. He's blown it. How could Jesus ever trust him? How could Jesus ever use him? How could he ever hope to do anything meaningful? He denied Jesus. He broke oath. He betrayed Jesus. I wonder if some of you here this morning don't feel that way about your past. I know I've felt it, and I've walked with so many that have felt like that what we've done is too much. That our sin, our failure is too much. And maybe Jesus can forgive us. But restore us, set us free, use us? I know too many that just sit in the pew week after week, holding on to the shame of their pain and brokenness, letting their failures determine their future, rather than faith in Jesus. I think that's where Peter was. Back to John 21. Let's go fishing. And they said to him, we'll go with you. I mean, Jesus didn't tell us what to do. Showed up, ate some breakfast, took off. What are we going to do now? Let's go fishing. So they went out. They got into the boat, and they caught nothing. I guess we're rusty. I guess we're out of practice. We spent 3 years as these itinerant evangelists with Jesus. We go out, fish one night, nothing. As day was breaking. Oh, I like these little details. The sun begins to come over the horizon. Just those first glimmers of light. Nights slowly fading away. And there's a figure on the beach. Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples didn't know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, did you catch anything?" No. There's nothing worse for a fisherman than striking out. They always want to exaggerate, right? You should have seen the one that got away. No. He said to them, "Why don't you cast out to the right side of the boat? You'll find some there." Now, if we don't know the story, that doesn't mean much. Jesus says, "Cast it over to the right side of the boat. You'll find some." And so they cast it, and they weren't able to haul it into the boat because of the quantity of the fish. The disciple whom Jesus loved, that's how John refers to himself in his gospel, says to Peter, "It's the Lord." Now, they're still too far away to recognize him, but they recognize him because this is what Jesus does. Okay? So Peter heard that it was the Lord. This is weird, right? So he gets dressed to jump into the water. He was stripped for work, and he throws himself into the sea. The other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far off from the land, about 100 yards off. And see, this is not the first time that Jesus has done this. In fact, the first time that he met Peter, this is exactly what he did. Right? Luke tells us about it in Luke 5. On one occasion, while the crowd was pressing in on him to hear the word of God, he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret. And he saw two boats by the lake, but the fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. So they'd fish during the night, they'd come in, they wash, they mend their nets. And Jesus is teaching, the crowd's pressing in on him, and so he gets into one of the boats, which was Simon's, and asked him to put out a little from the land, and then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. This is Simon's introduction to Jesus. I'm sure he's heard about him, and he's heard stuff, and now Jesus is in his boat. And Jesus is teaching the people. And when he finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Hey, why don't you put out into the deep and let your nets down for a catch?" I mean, we're here, right? Got the boat, got some nets. Why don't we go do this? And Simon's answered, "Master, we worked all night, and we got nothing. I know you're good with the Torah and stuff, but we're the fishermen. But if you want me to, I'll let down the nets." And when they'd done this, they enclosed a large number of fish so that their nets were breaking. And they signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both of the boats so full that they began to sink. That's a lot of fish. But when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, I am a sinful man, O Lord." What a moment. There's something about his recognition of what Jesus fills these boats with fish, and Peter recognizes who's in his boat. And he's overwhelmed by a sense of unworthiness. He falls down. It's a little bit of a drama queen here going on, right? "Depart from me, I'm so unclean. I'm sinful." Like, you got to picture this. Don't read this like a religious text. Think. You got two boats, little floppy fish all over, right? You got fishermen, the nets are breaking, they're trying to get into land. Jesus just standing in the boat watching all of it going, "This is hilarious." And Peter's like, "Oh, I'm so unworthy." You all with him were astonished at the catch of fish that they had taken, and so were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, okay, so this is where you got to take your religious goggles off. Don't be afraid, Simon. From now on, I'll teach you how to catch men. So we've turned that into this like religious slogan. I'm going to be a fisher of men. That's so cute. Jesus is making fun of him. Oh, you're so... Dude, it's okay. Get up. I'm going to teach you how to fish men. There's something so human about this. When they brought their boats to land, they left everything and followed him. You can't tell me that this moment didn't become a part of their shared history. So for 3 years, they travel around, sitting around the campfire, a bunch of guys. I remember several years back, we're sitting in a staff meeting, and we were talking about doing a family camp. And Denny sits there, listens to this whole conversation. We're talking about all these details and all this sort of stuff. And Denny's listening, and then Denny just looks up, and like the light bulb clicks on, and Denny goes, "A family camp? Why, the whole family could go to that." And to this day, we'll be sitting in staff meeting with nothing going on. And there'll be a little lull in staff meeting, and I'll go, "Family camp? The whole family could go to that," right? Because this is just the way it works, right? Like I can see Jesus and the disciples. They're going from one town to another. They stop for the night. They make their little campfire. They're eating and they're talking. And Jesus walks up and there's one of the other disciples and he drops down. "Get away from me, Jesus! I'm so unworthy." And everybody's poking Peter and laughing at it. Like this is like their defining moment. This is how Jesus called them. This is what they met. That's unbelievable. Now Peter's been broken. He's failed miserably. And what does Jesus do but come to him in the exact same way? That's not an accident. When they got on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place with fish laid out on it and bread. Jesus is hungry again. I imagine dying and coming back to life will work up quite an appetite. He's already cooked it for them. He's waiting for them. And Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you've just caught." So think about this. Like Peter gets out of the water, he's all wet, and he staggers up, and there's Jesus just sitting by the fire cooking breakfast. The boats get in, they got net just full of fish, and Jesus is like, "Yeah, go bring some of the fish." So Jesus is sitting on the beach, and they're counting fish. Simon Peter went aboard, and they hauled the net ashore full of large fish, 153 of them. I don't think there's anything symbolic or anything weird about that number. I just like the fact that they had to sit. You ever counted fish? 1, 2, 153 of them. There were so many of them, the net was not torn. And Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." And none of the disciples asked him, "Who are you?" because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he's raised from the dead. And when they'd finished breakfast, Jesus had a conversation with Peter that he needed desperately but didn't want to have. Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me? Do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." How was he not thinking about that night in the courtyard? When he cursed and took an oath, "I don't know him." Now here's Jesus sitting across a campfire. Simon, do you love me? Yeah, Lord, I love you. If you love me, I want you to feed my lambs. And he said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? What's that like for Peter? He's just told Jesus that he loves him, and Jesus says, hey, Simon, do you really love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, oh, tend my sheep. If you love me, you'll take care of the ones that I love. If you love me, you won't quit. If you love me, you'll do what I've made you to do. But he said to him the third time, and there's no mistake. It's not an accident that the man who denied Jesus 3 times is 3 times asked by Jesus, are you with me? Do you love me? Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was grieved because he had asked him the 3rd time, do you love me? And he said, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. That's his hope. You know I betrayed you. You know I failed. You know I blew it. But God, you know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, then feed my sheep. We've stripped the humanity off of Jesus and depersonalized him and made a religious figure out of him, but you can't do that with a text like this. There's nothing more personal than this. And it's not the warm and fuzzy Jesus who only wants us to feel good. This is Jesus putting his finger in the wound and pressing deeper and deeper and deeper, forcing Peter to confront the reality of his failure and his brokenness. There's a whole mindset in modern progressive evangelicalism that says God should never make us feel bad. That guilt is always a bad thing, that there's no place for shame, that there's no place for brokenness. And here's the main problem with that is that, like, if there's no place for guilt, then there's no place for forgiveness. If there's no sin and shame, then there's no restoration and grace. And Jesus, because he loved Peter, had the hard conversation with Peter. Jesus, because he loved and valued Peter, because he wanted him to be free, dug in, called him out, and healed him all at the same time. See, way back on that day when Jesus said, "You're Peter, and on this I'm going to build my church," like, Peter had a role, Peter had a place, Peter had a job as a shepherd. But he was a better shepherd, having been humbled and restored than he ever would have been before in his pride and arrogance. What Jesus does here is so important because, y'all, this is not just a story about Peter. These things were written to encourage us. These things were written that we might be led to this Jesus. See, the same Jesus that made breakfast and sat across a campfire from Peter and dealt with his greatest failure to set him free wants to do the very same thing with you and for you. And we can't hide our failure. We can't run away from it. We can't ignore it. We can't pretend. We can't justify it or rationalize it. We have to own it and face it and bring it to Jesus. Peter had a purpose. He wasn't perfect from that day on. He still made mistakes, but Peter fed the sheep. Peter loved the lambs, and Peter tended the flocks. Peter led. Peter was used by God greatly. And I find that so beautiful and so encouraging. God can take a man like Peter, who failed so spectacularly, and restore him. Not just cleanse him, not simply forgive him. You see, there's more happening in that. I often talk about this. We're forgiven from our sin, but we're forgiven for service. Peter stands as this example to us this morning that this is what Jesus came to do. This is why he was born. This is why he died. This is why he rose again. So that our failure and our weakness and our brokenness and our sin and our shame can be confronted and can be transformed. See, that's what God's grace does. God's grace is not passive. Jesus didn't die and rise again so God can look at you and say, all right, I've checked the box on your sin. You're good to go. Because our sin is not objective. Our sin is not abstract. Our sin is personal. Our sin is within us. Jesus was born, Jesus died, Jesus rose again so that sin within us might be healed and restored. So that we might become who God made us to be in the first place. And join him in his work. So whatever failures haunt you, whatever skeletons linger in your closet, whatever limits your capacity to believe that God is not only for you, but he's with you and he wants to use you, those are the things that Jesus wants to deal with in your life. And just like he restored and healed and set Peter free, he can restore and heal and set you free. But it's not a religious experience. It's not, I can't wave a wand. You can't send me a check and I'll give you a prayer cloth. It's not that. You gotta meet with Jesus. You've got to see him as he is. And I know, you say, well, he's not here. Peter got to sit across the campfire. But listen, the Spirit has been given to reveal Jesus. You can know Jesus today through the Word and through the Spirit just as well as Peter knew him. That's the point. So we've bought into a lie that we've got to accept a lesser Jesus, a caricature, a religious icon, when the risen and resurrected King of the universe is available, that we can go boldly before the throne of grace. We can cast all our cares upon him because he loves us. That the Jesus who set Peter free is the same Jesus that wants to set us free. And so the only question is, would we rather stay shackled by our failures, or will we let Jesus set us free?